Hey, Stuart.
What brings you guys here?
We're looking for a recommendation about comic books.
Oh, well, I recommend you don't open a store and sell them.
Welcome back to Vox Podcast, the weekly pseudo-academic pop culture analysis roundtable with drinking and swearing. My name is Christopher Maverick, but you can call me Mav, and I am once again here with my co-hosts Katya and Wayne. How's it going, guys?
Okay.
Yo.
I know exactly, as we record, we're 46 days into this thing. I know because I was watching a news report yesterday and listening to Andrew Cuomo talk about how long since they first started officially calling this a problem. We've had the city closed down a little less than that, but this is weird.
Yes.
How are you guys doing?
Okay. Every winter, I do a little bit of the seasonal affective thing every winter, and I joke about how I hibernate. Mm-hmm. That's taken on a new meaning because, it's just been a metaphor for feeling down and sleepy in February. Now I feel like I can feel my systems slowing down. My perception of time is different. My thought processes are slower. I can actually feel all that happening, which I guess is better than having ongoing panic attacks.
Okay, if you can feel your thoughts, I'm a little concerned.
To me, my X-Men.
You doing okay, Katya? How about you? You've had your...
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the weird position of, which I'm sure is not completely unique, of trying to figure out how to relocate for a new job. I'm extremely fortunate in that I just was offered a job about a week ago, but
yay, good for you.
Congratulations.
I have to get to another state to do that, and that is very dicey, especially because the state in question is Michigan, which per capita I think is about as bad as New York and LA.
Yeah, it's getting close.
They're in the top 5 with a much lower population.
Mm-hmm.
So
this has been interesting.
So I'm working from home for the immediate future, thankfully. They're being flexible on that because I think they're just we don't want more people here right now. They're we want you to do things, but we don't want you physically here.
Congrats on having a new job. I hope we all live long enough for you to be there. So
and if anyone has any random tips about where the hell to live in Ann Arbor, let me know.
So anyway, I guess that leads us, sort of roundabout into the discussion for today, because, obviously still in the global coronavirus occupation. And we had to, this show was an idea for a while, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I guess I want to introduce the guests first. So we're going to talk about the world of retail, specifically comic book retail, but retail in general in the age of coronavirus and what's going to happen after this. So we've invited a friend of ours. Dan, you've been on the show before, so welcome back, Dan Greenwald, you were on the show before for one of your podcasts, but
right.
Yeah, you're more here for the other one this time. So you are, in addition to hosting the TV pilot podcast, you are also host of Comic Book Pitt.
Yes, that's correct. And thanks for having me on the show. I'm glad to be back and to talk with you guys. We've been doing Comic Book Pitt since 2008, and not a lot to show for it other than just we have a lot of fun. We got a lot of episodes, a lot of fun. So you can always find us for comic book reviews and discussion, mostly a lot of getting off track all the time and talking about all kinds of crazy shit. But
we know nothing about that.
No.
Yeah, we're very topical. We never digress. I'm always on topic.
Well, so
I
on your
say
show,
on the show where I know nothing about it.
that's good because your show often, Dan, is talking about comic book industry news and what's happening in titles and what's happening in comics and things like news and sort of reviews and stuff like that. And now for the last 3 weeks, how's that been going?
Well, I mean, we walk a fine line because obviously all kinds of stuff are happening. And like we said, kind of pre-show, not just with the comic book industry, but every industry, the entertainment industry is just wildly in flux. But, there's plenty of stuff to talk about because everyone is scrambling to try and simultaneously throw everyone a life preserver during this time, like retailers and artists, comic book companies and publishers. But at the same time, then we're always looking to the future, what's life going to be like after this? Is there going to be life after this for the comic book industry? But I guess the fine line that we walk is, and I discuss this with everyone that I do the show with, is that, our podcast should be a haven, not just for us, but for the people that listen to us. So we actually are trying to just kind of shy away a little bit from Corona Talk. By the way, that's the name of my new podcast, Corona Talk. I kid. Dude,
I discovered the coronavirus subreddit today. I'm sure someone's made it.
Oh yeah,
there
it's
are
out there.
so many coronavirus. I'm in a lot of podcast community groups, just online, and so many podcasts have started in the last couple of weeks devoted to talking about the coronavirus because no one has anything else to do.
Right,
But eventually it just gets to the point where I feel like there's almost too much to talk about because everything changes daily, and there's always new. I mean, and I don't have to tell you guys this. I mean, we're in a 24-hour news cycle. There's always there's never nothing to talk about.
Yeah, that's true.
So we've kind of all agreed to make an effort to talk less about the pandemic on the show, unless the caveat is unless it relates directly to something relevant to what comics or the entertainment industry, because we also talk a lot about movies and TV and such. So we're trying to straddle that line between still having fun talking about all the nerdy stuff we love to talk about, but also trying to occasionally talk about some relevant news.
Well, so
okay, before we get into that, I have to ask the hard-hitting questions that I was brought here to ask as the person who knows how to comment. Sure. Is there a pandemic-themed X-Men?
You mean an X-Man with pandemic problems? Well, sort of. There are certainly. I don't know. Do you count them as an X-Men or not? Because pestilences.
Yeah.
There are immune characters from the book tour. Yeah.
Yeah. There was that.
So they're just
character.
X-Men for everything.
Yeah.
There was that series Contagion last year.
Yeah, Contagion. I couldn't think of what it was called.
In the Legion of Substitute Heroes, there's the heroine by the name of Infectious Lass.
Yes.
So,
and there's
so we know for sure this wasn't caused by some sort of weird supervillain mutant.
There's always Typhoid Mary.
Typhoid Mary, yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
In the Daredevil stuff.
So yeah, I mean, even when you're talking about things like movies, though, I mean, obviously we've got issues like for our box office game, we had talked about we were going to do this week or last week. We've been planning for months to do a show all about New Mutants, the New Mutants movie, which should have come out a week and a half ago, or
a year and a half ago.
Well, okay, also a year and a half ago, also 2 years. Yes, but it's so going to happen this time. The New Mutants movie is going to come out, and that didn't. So everything's in flux, and I think you're right, but I don't know. It's weird because we had planned today's show, or we've been trying to plan today's show for weeks, months even, and trying to find the right angle for it. Wayne, you should tell people what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, and it plays out of conversations you and I specifically have been having at the store for years now, and conversations I've had with different people. I truly believe, comics history. For most of the life of comics, they were sold on the newsstand. They were distributed through national distribution things. Sometime in the mid 1970s, the direct sales market was created. So comics went directly to comic shops. and
as well as newsstands for a while,
and as well as newsstands for a while. But that change was a seminal change in the comics industry. That allowed for the creation of the comic book store. It allowed for the creation of small publishers who didn't have to do giant print runs. It allowed for new creators to come in who would never have been hired by Marvel and DC because they weren't up to their standards, but it gave them a place to develop their skills until they became professional. It was radical, significant sea change in the way comics were made. It's my belief that we have been undergoing a similar seismic change in the last 5 years or so in the comics industry. It's more diffuse than that. In 1980, you can say it's the direct market. In 2020, you can say it's a whole bunch of stuff.
Right.
And I've been talking about this in little ways off and on for years. I've been, this is the tooting my own horn portion of the show. I've been quoted in Publishers Weekly the last 5 years in a row. They do an annual issue on the state of the comics market. And the first year, just the woman, Shannon O'Leary. Hi, Shannon. Who writes these articles. I didn't know Shannon at the time. Shannon reached out to me. I don't know how she found me. Just reached out to Phantom. I'm sure because of our reputation, and like they did with a lot of things, they'd let me answer it because I'm the talkative one who writes. And I answered her questions and sent them back in, and I was quoted, and that was cool. And a year later, she wrote back to me. She's like, typically every year I try to get different points of view, but yours were so thoughtful and well written. I'm coming back to you. Yay me. And that continued for the next 5 years. Yeah. And if you go back to my quotes in those issues of Publishers Weekly, you'll see I'm talking about this issue throughout. The comics industry has not been in a good place in the last few years from a retail point of view. And I'm talking specifically about comics and graphic novels, not all the other accessories, hero clicks and action figures and et cetera. Funko Pops. Yeah, exactly.
The lifeblood of the comic book store.
Yep.
Since 2000. Yeah. Since 2012. Yeah.
Yeah. But seeing those changes, just changes I've seen, foot traffic in the store, our store, Phantom, where I used to work until November. We prided ourselves on being primarily a bookstore. We had some Funko Pops, but 70% of our business was comics and graphic novels. That's what we wanted to sell. Mm-hmm. And
you could tell by floor space. So for the listeners, Wayne has worked at 2 different comic book stores. He worked at,
I've worked at 3 over the years, but that's
right. In the last 20 years, you worked at one store for 20 years until 6 months ago. Then you moved to another store, and you worked for the other store as well. And I worked at one 30 years ago.
Yeah, right. Well, and for the record, I worked at my current store for a year before I worked at Phantom. So this is my second tenure with New Dimension Comics, and I'll give it Phantom the Attic in Oakland, in Pittsburgh, and New Dimension Comics, which is a chain of stores in this area. So shout out to those guys, and I have nothing but good things to say about both of them. They've both been very good to me over the years. Right. They do have different business models based on a lot of factors, and they both work in different ways.
Because having not worked at either store, you can tell when you walk into Phantom that it is primarily a bookstore versus when you walk into a New Dimension, it is primarily a stuff store. New Dimension devotes more physical floor real estate to non-comic books than Phantom of the Attic does.
Action figures and Funko Pops. Yes. And to their credit, they also have tremendous floor space dedicated to dollar books. Thousands of boxes of dollar back issues, which is a huge part of his business that we when I say we, I still typically refer to Phantom because I was there for 20 some years. We just simply didn't have the space or the
New Dimension's a bigger store
to deal with that. It's a much bigger store, and as a chain, he has several much bigger stores. But our just different changes. The sales on the monthly titles, the floppies as the kids these days are calling them, had definitely dropped. Our back issue sales had declined to the point of being almost non-existent. Pretty much the life cycle of a new comic was we did 80% sell through in the first week, another 10% over the next month. That 10% we didn't sell went into back issues, and after 6 months, we would have that book for the rest of eternity. because graphic novels would come out. So we had that transition from people buying back issues to buying graphic novels. And you can overcome that if you have thousands of boxes of dollar comics and people who are willing to dig through them. But our clientele was very definitively shifting to graphic novels. And that was a trend we were on really early. And that was a trend that was really good to us for a long, long time. What we didn't see happening was that shift in just format, the way people read the book, changed foot traffic in the store. Like, Mav, you came in every week to buy this week's floppies because that's the way you like to read it. Me
and a bunch of old people.
You're right. Yeah. You're right. And that's it. We had a bunch of other customers. Some of our biggest customers came in and dropped a lot of money at 437 every Wednesday for the last 20 some years. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Ray. And certain people who've even commented on the blog post for this particular episode.
Right,
so we know they're listening.
And God bless you. Thank you. But those are the people who were there every week, and we counted on that weekly foot traffic. What happened is, if you were reading Walking Dead through trade paperbacks, you would only come in once every 6 months.
Every 6 months.
Yeah. So not only were you not coming in the store and being introduced to other things, that's the big piece of it. We didn't have that return business where you got turned on to other books. You were a Walking Dead customer, as opposed to you're there every week and you discover Deadly Class or 100 Bullets or whatever I happen to be recommending that week.
And if you're only coming every 6 months, so there's the other problem. If you're only coming to a store every 6 months to buy just Walking Dead, that's only $20 you're spending every 6 months. You're bringing $20 into the store every 6 months, and you don't get the experience of. I mean, obviously, there's experience of being turned on to onto something like Walking Dead, but also just sort of the win of the comic book store. Because I made the only sort of kind of joke on the blog post that comic book stores don't really need to exist, nor have they had to need to exist for quite some time now, because now we have the internet and I can literally order anything direct from the publisher just as easily as my comic book shop can. That wasn't true when I was 14, right? Like when I was a kid, the internet didn't have a direct access line to be able to order from Diamond. I could subscribe to something via mail if it was published by Marvel or DC, or I had to go to the comic book store. That was the only way I was going to get an indie book, right? That's not true anymore. I could get them on my own, but now...
And that's absolutely one of the other factors that is part of the sea change that I'm talking about is, you don't have to go to the comic shop. And this has affected other industries as well. Go to your local record store, CD store. Good luck.
What is the CD store you've talked about?
Exactly.
Where are those?
Or bookstores, bookstores, same thing. Video game stores, Steam is killing video stores. Video game stores. So it's not a problem that is exclusive to the comics. No. I mean, this is a much broader spectrum issue.
Movie stores don't exist anymore. There are no Blockbusters. There are no, or in
Suncoast.
Do you remember Suncoast Video where you could buy a video? Those that's not a thing anymore. And it's barely a thing at like Best Buys, right? It's not. But why did I keep going? I kept going to the comic book store because I linked on the blog. Yeah. Well, no, it was I linked to this on the blog, and I'll link to it in the show notes as well. Eric Stevenson is the current publisher of Image Comics. Image is the third largest comic book publisher in the United States of America. By third largest, if I remember correctly, that means they have 5% of sales in America, with Marvel holding 40%, DC's holding 30%. So that takes them 7. Image holds like 5%, and the other 25% is split by everybody else. And by everybody else, that's hundreds and hundreds of people like fight over 25%. Image has 5%, which makes them a juggernaut compared to everybody else, but small beans compared to Marvel or DC.
Yeah.
And Stevenson wrote this really lovely, this is before everything got shut down. But when things were starting to go bad, he wrote this lovely letter to the industry where he's like, it looks like people are going to be shutting down. It looks like things are going to, Diamond hadn't stopped distribution yet, but things are, stores are being shut down. So we at Image, we're gonna pull back on publishing stuff, and we're opening up returns, which is a complicated thing that we don't need to go into. But returns, and just in general, returning merchandise is very, very complicated, and mostly doesn't happen in the comic book industry.
Right.
The modern comic book industry.
The direct market was based on the idea of no returns. I mean, that was one of the core changes that took place.
And he said, we want to open that up for now. He started his letter by saying, when I was a kid, I lived in a city with no comic book shop, and I've been a lifelong comic book fan, and I never want to live in a city like that again. So whatever I can do to help them survive, we're going to try to do. And please, any of my bigger competitors, and he didn't name them by name, but again, there's only two, please do what you can to make this happen. And I thought when he wrote that, I was like, he's right, because I don't need a comic book store anymore. But I liked going there because, Wayne, I absolutely did meet Wayne there. I met Dan there.
That's
even non-comic, even non-comic book
that's
people.
where I met Katya.
Actually. It also sounds like it's the same problem of like fabric stores and sewing, right?
Yeah.
Is that like,
yes,
you only go shopping for things on the internet usually because you want to buy that, like, you know about it already and you're going looking for it. Like, I, as a person who casually reads comics, will walk into a comics book store for funsies, drop, $30, $40, like, on occasion, even if it's not like a regular habit of mine.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, to me, that says it's like having comic book shops isn't just like about getting people comics. It's also like more likely to bring new people into the comic book, community than say, like, with like the Amazon service of like the Netflix of comics. What's it called? Comixology?
Yeah.
Yes.
Or am I thinking of a different one?
No, it's Comixology. That's absolutely it.
But people are finding that community online. I mean, going back to chat rooms and that sort of thing, and that's it.
But you also still have to go looking for it,
right?
I think. Right. Like anything online, you have to know it exists, and you have to like take the initiative to go find it. Whereas like I could stumble in off the street into a comic book store from just wandering around town.
Well, and they're the things that. Well, Dan, you were for a while. You were part of that group with Babyak and Scott and those guys. Like, we had a group of guys who came in every Wednesday night. It was boys' night out. You came in, you got your comics,
it was a ritual.
Food. Yeah.
Yep.
And I mean, that was one specific group who I saw every Wednesday at the same time, and it was the same grouping, more or less, of 5 or 6 guys. Give or take 1 or 2 based on whether they could make it that night. But you guys weren't the only ones who did that. That, like, the comic shop became that, once again, that community thing. And I do think that's something that's missing and I know that sounds like an old guy, you download your music through your Spotify. You don't get to talk about records to the guy at the store. And
it always reminded me of, it was like Cheers for nerds.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
I will say, as a token millennial, though, there's a reason like a lot of people my age are going have record players. Like, I think there is a desire for that. It's not just like an old like generational thing. Like, people to have that.
And I do wonder about that. Not to sound like the old guy, but I do wonder if we have a generation of young people who just simply haven't experienced that, so they don't know it exists. They don't know it's something they would enjoy if they were in the habit of doing it. And I don't know how you convey that information to people who have never had that experience. These are all factors that have been affecting brick and mortar stores, and I have seen that shift away from as comics and superheroes specifically, but as comics have gotten, as the imagery of comics, the characters of comics have become more part of our overall culture, i.e. Marvel movies and TV shows, et cetera, that there's that mindset of, that's got to be great for business. And no, it really isn't. I think
it was horrible.
It was horrible in many ways. Yeah. Cause there are people who, they'll watch the Avengers movie. They come in, there's not a book that looks anything like the Avengers movie, and they leave. But I think there's also the whole, why should I go buy The Flash when I can watch it every Tuesday night at 8? So that's what happened to that's all that happened to the novel industry quite some time ago. I'll wait for the movie has been a thing. Yeah, exactly. Like there's no need to make a trip to the comic shop to get your superhero fix when turn on the TV right now. There's a superhero show playing someplace. So I think that's a piece of it. All the new people have come in. I have friends, people I care about deeply. I see on Facebook all the time who it's all about the imagery. I have friends who they have the Harley Quinn shirt, and they have Captain America mugs and this, that, and the other. People who are all about the imagery, who in 20 some years never set foot in my store.
Right.
Yep.
And
Yep.
which in some respect is great. It's great for the art form.
Mhm.
I actually love, so I'm not the guy who's ever going to be, I'm never going to be the old guy who is like, well, the kids don't read books. They're not, we talked about this with Nicole, who's been on our show many times. Being a comic fan for a lot of people means I've watched all 24 Marvel movies.
Right.
And that needs to be okay. That needs to be an okay thing. But I also don't want the community to go away. And it's going to shift in some ways. Like, okay, so that weekly comic book store discussion that we had became this show in many ways, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
And Dan, your show as well. Your show is like, so like Wayne said, 6 guys, 4 of them are literally on your podcast.
Right.
Weekly.
Well, that's
you and Link and like that's.
Yeah.
So
Scott
that's
everyone that is on the show is someone that I met through either through the comic shop or by extension, like a Comic Con or a small comic convention or or just
everyone I know except my mom and dad I've met through comics.
Well, it is crazy, and I've talked about this, that how many people I've met through doing the podcast. But again, the podcast that I do is, like I said, an extension of life outside of the comic book store. Because, when I think about all the friends I've made just by shopping there weekly, Wayne married me and my wife. Mm-hmm. Where else can you go? What other retail establishment can you go and make
for the listeners,
a lifelong
he means
friend?
Wayne performed the service.
Yes.
just clarifying.
He did not enter in a multi-person marriage.
Yes.
But I've been to other people that I've made friends with. I've been to their weddings, and
you're not the only person I've done that with through the store. Scott, who's on your podcast every week. I performed his ceremony. Right. Yep. There's just I have really intense, what I think of as now lifelong friendships that I made through that setting. Now, I was in that position of I was there 40 hours a week. I met everybody who walked in.
Right.
But I saw those friendships develop. I saw relationships develop. I saw people meet and 3 years later they get married, all in our store. People have been married in our store. Like literally they came in and had their ceremony on a Sunday morning at Phantom of the Attic Comics. So because it's been so much part of my life, I hate to see it go away, but there's just some really very practical, the brick and mortar comic shop has been suffering for quite some time now. It's changing. I think there's some dramatic changes going on. Another piece of it, I think you were talking about Marvel and DC being the major publishers, and that's still absolutely true. If you look at New York Times best-selling list, the best-selling graphic novels are not Marvel and DC graphic novels.
They're not even on it. Yeah, they're not even. They're rarely even on the list. I shouldn't say never. They are rarely on the list.
Young people who are discovering comics, there are more graphic novels available than ever. Young people who are discovering graphic novels are not discovering it through the new Spider-Man graphic novel trade paperback. They're discovering
Raina
Telgemeier, her book Smile.
Noelle Stevenson. Yes.
Noelle Stevenson. There are these people who are coming into the industry through what has in the past been non-traditional channels, meaning not Marvel and DC. They're uploading stuff onto their Tumblr, and a year later they're being published in the New York Times bestseller list. And there are young people who are discovering graphic novels who are, to me, the future of the customer base of this industry. If we're going to keep selling hard copy graphic novels, this is the audience that's out there, and most of them don't give a shit about the Hulk. Sorry, they don't. And I really think, and this is once again a trend that Phantom was really on top of. And Marvel DC still our bread and butter because that's been the traditional customer base.
Yeah.
Phantom's location between the universities and a museum being right there, we had a broad range of clientele, and boy, we sold a ton of that kind of stuff. I just want to point out when I say that Marvel and DC combined for 70%, and that is a remarkable number. But I mentioned earlier that I worked in the store 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. And at that point they were probably 90 to 95.
Like, so like that's so over a period of 20 years or so, they lost 20% of market share, and sales were down overall, because at the point when I was working in the store, the best selling comics in the late 80s, early 90s, the stores that were selling best, the comics that were selling best were selling in the millions of copies.
Yeah, like, and that's it. Yeah. Well, and that's it. 70% of an industry that doesn't sell very many comics.
Right.
I don't have numbers in front of me, but I'm going to go out on a limb here. The best-selling comic book today, well, not today because there are no comics being sold today because of the pandemic, but the best-selling comic in 2020, the single best-selling single comic in 2020 sells worse than the worst-selling comic in 1975. Sells less copies
from the big two.
Yeah.
Probably close. The best selling from the big two is usually around a couple 100,000 copies, and the worst sellings in the 70s were probably around 50. So not quite, but on par.
But that best selling comic is usually multiples beyond the average book.
Yes, yeah, by far, yeah. Your average DC or Marvel book is about 25,000 copies right now. Your average DC or Marvel book right now that's in pretty good shape is about 20,000 to between 20 and 30,000.
In 1986, Cerebus the Aardvark was selling 30,000 copies.
Easily. Yes. Yeah. Easily. Without a question. And anything that, like, a book is in danger of cancellation now from the big two once it hits about 15,000, 10 to 15,000. If something was selling 10 to 15,000 copies in 1985, they're a laughing stock. That can't have happened. It's not worth the paper. Right. Wasn't worth killing the tree.
No, that doesn't count digital sales and that sort of thing, which is another piece of it. But yeah, so this changeover, like I believe that for comic shops to survive, and once again, this is before the pandemic stuff. We'll get to that in a second. I really think for comic shops, and then there's still there's that mindset, the old school comic shop that just Marvel and DC has been the bread and butter. I've been blessed to work in a shop where we recognize that comics are more than Marvel and DC. We were all into different stuff. I personally constantly recommended books that weren't Marvel and DC. My favorite books in the last 10 years are really not Marvel and DC books. I say that, I read stuff that I enjoy, but my favorite books have not been the mainstream stuff. But I really think for comic shops to survive over the long haul, to tap into that new audience, they really need to start carrying and promoting these other non-Marvel DC books. There's stuff from a company called First Second, Raina Telgemeier books. Comic shops really need to go out of their way to tap into that other market. Now, the problem with that is you can go to any Barnes and Noble in the country and find a display of young adult graphic novels. And if you have just discovered Raina Telgemeier through Barnes and Noble, you don't know comic book stores exist.
Right. Nor should you. And that's kind of the thing.
How do you drive that future business to a comic shop has been a question we've been addressing at Phantom for years now. How do we let those people know we exist? And then the new dimension take was the other way. If you would say, all right, it's not just about comic books, it's also about all the other stuff that goes into geek culture. So how do we capitalize on that? Like, we talked about selling Funko Pops, selling movies, selling merchandise, T-shirts, like all of that stuff that, like, 'cause the people who we're talking about, like Wayne's talking about people who are physically reading a comic. A Raina Telgemeier comic is a comic. It is a book with panels in it. But then the other comic fan is the person who doesn't give a shit about physical paper books. They are a fan of, oh my God, I saw Deadpool, I saw Harley Quinn, I saw Avengers, and I really want, because I don't want to shortchange the 7-year-old who saw, it wasn't me because I'm too old and there was no Avengers movie. But if I were 7 years old and an Avengers movie came out, that would change my life. I remember, I would want to own a Captain America shield.
When my nephew was 5 when the Black Panther movie came out, and it was the only thing he cared about for a year. He did not want to have a conversation with you after that unless it involved Black Panther. Wakanda was all he cared about because it was the coolest thing he'd ever heard of. And you want to be able to turn that, he's 5, he doesn't have any money, but assuming that continues, you want to be able to turn that into a customer. My niece is the same way with Batgirl. Anything Batgirl she loves. So, but by anything Batgirl she loves, she's reading the comic book because I bought her a subscription to the Batgirl comic and it comes to her house. But more, she cares about her Batgirl doll. She cares about her Batgirl pajamas. She cares about her. That's
I don't have anything. I don't have anything against any of that. My focus has always been on the books because I'm a reader more than I'm a collector of stuff. And if you were in my house and saw all my stuff, you would argue with that. But in general, compared to lots of people I know, I'm not as into the stuff. But yeah, and I will say, and I don't want to get too much into the specifics of the different business practices of the two stores because they're both legitimate and have a different customer base, and that's fine. They both work. They're both and the stores are friendly. I mean, while technically the stores are in competition in this area, our stores have been our stores have been friendly for 30 years. There's no I worked for New Dimension in 1997. Jeff at Phantom made me an offer that was better. And quite honestly, I just live closer. I mean, that was a big deciding factor. I could walk to work in 20 minutes or drive to work in 45 minutes, and we were set up next to each other at a convention the week between me leaving one job and the other. And it was fine. We spent the weekend joking about it. Todd kept coming over and trying to trade old comics to Jeff to get me back. It was it was fun. So there's no hard feelings. I don't want to create any false conflict between the two stores. But they are different. And I will say, just working part time at New Dimension now, there's some weekends in the stuff they sold that Phantom did. I mean, Phantom had a handful of Funko Pops and we had some t-shirts, but it was certainly not our focus. I am just quite frankly stunned at the money coming in at New Dimension for that stuff.
Because it's a different clientele. So for people who aren't in our city, who aren't in Pittsburgh, New Dimension, the location that New Dimension has more locations than Phantom. But New Dimension, the location Wayne is talking about, is at an outdoor mall in Pittsburgh. It is a large shopping district. One might go there in order to it's literally next door. Well, actually, it's literally next door to a Target and a Best Buy. That's where it is.
The Best Buy
gone, just closed. But there's a Lowe's and there's there's a Bath and Body Works. Literally, we're in this area where it's a mall. And then if you compare that to where Phantom is sandwiched between two colleges next to a bunch of restaurants that cater to 20-year-olds who are above an art store. It's an entirely different clientele. And it's not that there
a lot of the business differences between the two develop purely because of location.
Right. It's not that there aren't. Certainly children will come into Phantom, but if a child, an actual child, if a 7-year-old comes into Phantom, they're there because their dad or mom is a huge comic book fan who's been coming to the store for 20 years. If a 7-year-old comes into New Dimension, it's because we were just shopping at Target and look, there's a comic book store there. Let's look there. It's a different mentality. And on the other hand, to look at New Dimension, it's not like New Dimension doesn't have people who are looking for a Raina Telgemeier book because there's a Barnes and Noble a couple stores over. So if I were looking for a Raina Telgemeier book, why the hell would I go to this New Dimension when there's literally a perfectly good Barnes and Noble next door that has Telgemeier and the Jane Austen book that I want?
I think the one thing,
exactly right.
I think the one thing that even though both stores have different, sometimes different philosophical, stances on selling, or what they sell, the thing that they have in common, that they've had in common for decades, is customer loyalty.
Yes,
and that is so strong. That's
very true.
And I've seen it firsthand, both as a customer and being on the other side of the counter, being, and I've seen the, when the New Dimension store, that is the one that Matt is describing, when it first moved to that location, it moved under very dire circumstances.
Real quick for everybody who's not from Pittsburgh, the mall that New Dimension was in 15 years was suddenly condemned one weekend, and everybody in the mall had to move out.
And it has essentially been a ghost mall for quite some time.
Yes, right. But it suddenly,
Right,
they had to move quickly.
Yes.
Right. And the outpouring of support from customers who literally just showed up to help move the store because they had to move out. I think they were given 30 days, but Todd was like, I just want to get out of here ASAP. And he put out the bat signal, and people just came out over the course of a weekend and just for the promise of maybe some pizza and beer. And pack up an entire store and drive it down and open up another store. And that to me was just like, that's the community. That's why I want comic book stores to exist. It is literally because if in all honesty, if Phantom needed that tomorrow, or if Baker's, the comic book store that I worked at in my quote unquote town 30 years ago, if they needed that, every comic book store in America that has survived this long, if you've survived this long, it's because you've created a safe space for a community of geeks who love you, And
when Phantom moved in 2008, and we moved across the street. so we didn't put out the bat signal for 1 million people, but we had a bucket brigade of long boxes going across the street one night.
Because it was convenient. It was just like, we can help you, That's why. So to talk about Stevenson's letter, that's why I want comic book stores to exist, because there are communities online. Again, this show is online. This is an online conversation. Thank you to everybody who has downloaded this. But that is not the same as hanging out in a store, whether it's a comic book store or a record store or a movie store. Like I miss Blockbusters. I honestly do, because paging through things on Netflix or watching movie review podcasts on YouTube shows is not the same as hanging out with other movie geeks in person that I just don't get to do the same way anymore. And I haven't been able to do it in a decade because they just went away. And I don't want, because I love movies. If you listen to our show, you can tell I love movies. I don't want that to happen to comic book. I don't want to lose that experience and to have it relegated to just Reddit and Facebook.
And I'm not sure what needs to happen to ensure that happens. And this was happening anyway. I think the business was in trouble in many ways for the last 2 or 3 years. This change has been happening in ways that I think a lot of stores weren't ready to deal with or hadn't quite figured out. Phantom, as an example, I no longer work there because sales are down. There is a very practical. We were a hugely successful business for a long, long time, and last fall it downsized because it's not that successful anymore. And if that's not a cautionary tale for the entire industry, I don't know what is. When we were nominated for the Eisner Spirit of Retail Award in 2009, and at that time, talking to our Diamond sales rep, just getting some numbers for the presentation I put together. I don't want to throw out too many specific numbers here, but in terms of business through Diamond, orders through Diamond, we were one of the top stores in the country. That doesn't count buying back issue collections like New Dimension does. Doesn't count, all this other stuff. Purely our orders through Diamond, the company that supplies new
just
comics.
Paper comics.
Just paper copies, graphic novels, and a few T-shirts or whatnot. But the bulk of our order was comics and graphic novels. As a single store, not a chain, we were one of the top accounts in the country, which is kind of staggering to me. I mean, there's a lot of small shops out there, but and quite honestly, the people who beat us were the big chain stores in major metropolitan areas. Yeah, you have your Jay and Silent Bob's, your Japanese Comics, which he owns, but chains in Chicago and Los Angeles and St. Mark's Place in New York City, which has more people walk through on a Wednesday afternoon than we get in June. That's indicative of the whole industry in many, many ways. Okay, so now there's a pandemic and comics aren't being published for the first time since 1932. They're all closed down. There's no new material coming in. Every comic shop in America is now closed. We have retailers who, there are all kinds of programs out there, but rent. Payroll is down because I'm not the only laid off comic shop employee at the moment.
All of them are. Yes.
All of them are.
Yep.
I was the vanguard of
caveat, Wayne, as a retailer laid off, but since comics are not being produced right now, there's an industry of creators.
Yes.
like literally for the first time in 80, almost 90 years, an industry has ground to a complete halt over an 8-day period.
Now, I know there are people out there who are working independently, like Ed Pisker,
sure,
guy is working on his comic. He works at home. He's always worked from home. He's continuing to work on his current project with the faith that at some point Dark Horse will publish it. He has a contract. When the industry gets back together, it will be published. And I'm sure that Raina Telgemeier is probably drawing her new graphic novel as we speak. That sort of thing is still going on.
Sure.
But Marvel and DC essentially got the pencils down order. We're not producing any new work right now.
And that's not and that's not just the comic book industry. We're also talking about the same thing happened to the movie industry
and the TV industry.
Our game, which for listeners who are not regular listeners, every year we play a game that we stole from another podcast where we draft movies, and the game is designed so that I can win because I'm the big movie guy. And right now I'm not winning. Right now, the person who cares least about movies, who is giggling in the background, is winning the game. And Katya may win the game because as we record, we're not sure that any more movies are going to be released in 2020. People are saying their dates that it's back up and running by fall. I don't know that I believe that.
Yeah.
Given what
I do appreciate
what the news says.
Literally, the only thing that would cause me to win box office game is
a pandemic.
A global pandemic has brought the planet to a screeching halt.
I have now come to the conclusion that you have orchestrated this entire pandemic simply to win this game.
I mean,
couldn't you have used a weather dominator or something,
mass device.
It seemed like the weather manipulation might cause more, damage to climate change. And right now we're seeing the lowest pollution levels we've seen in over a decade. Yep.
So, Well, but that's the major scale of this. Like, the reason the pollution is down is because the travel industry is closed right now. No one's going to work. Even people who are working from home, which means there's no cars on the street anywhere on the planet.
I've gotten like 5 weeks to the gallon recently. So.
Oh God!
We haven't had to fill up our car in a month.
Prices have dropped to basically nothing.
Yeah, well, and that's we have this thing where people are out of work. The money's not coming in. At the same time, we're also not spending it on anything other than rent and essentials. Yeah.
Right.
So the entire capitalist system has been boarded of late,
which is good in some ways, but also but I mean it's a problem because as a scholar, even, I'm definitely, actually, I know Katya is too, because we did our masters together. I'm trained very much in Marxist scholarship, which does not mean what people think it means on the internet, but close enough for this conversation. And so, I got no problem with bringing down the capitalist system. Go for it, but it's not necessarily the thing that you want to crash involuntarily overnight.
Yeah.
Because we don't have a replacement in place. And
you need a plan, right?
Yeah, and we didn't change the cap, because I see people talking about, this is why we need socialized healthcare, and it's like, yeah, we do. But the thing is, you can't just crash the system and not replace it, because for all the things, I see people talk about social distancing, and I will never be the guy who ever yells at anybody for not doing it. I know lots of people who do, and this is my serious pitch. Should I put the music on in the background? Serious. Hold on. So my serious pitch is, if you are one of those people, who doesn't like that there are people out there not social distancing, understand that the idea of surviving a pandemic, being able to survive and to social distance, there is implicit privilege in that. There are people who literally can't. And I'm not just talking about the people who are working, your essential workers, who are your nurses or your people working at the grocery store. If this had happened, we'll talk about this on a show that we're having coming up. If this had happened when I was an undergrad, I wouldn't have been able to go home because my family had moved out while, after I went to college, and they moved to the other side of the country. I just lived at college at that point. My job would have went away because I was working for the university, just as a computer lab attendant, and I literally would have been stuck in a dorm room of a ghost town place with no income, probably just robbing people or something. I don't know. The idea of being able to not work for most people who live paycheck to paycheck is scary as fuck, and people die because they can't do it. So yeah, it's this sucks for me as a grad student who has nowhere, has no jobs coming in, but I'm not that poor kid anymore. So I'm in great shape. Wayne is laid off for the second time in a year. It's not fun, but you're surviving. There are literally people who have nowhere to go, and I don't think people understand that when they say, well, how come you're not staying 6 feet away? How come you want to go to work? So, understand that. Yeah.
Bravo.
Yeah. But anyway, I see that, and I get really irritated when people are like, well, you shouldn't care about just, so you can't buy your comic books. Oh, so you can't, who cares about a stupid football game or something? Who cares about football games? People who, work concessions and literally haven't had income in 2 months now and don't have a savings because they work concessions to feed a family. So this matters.
Well,
when you're talking
the number of people who are here in Pittsburgh, we've had food bank opening up, and we have lines.
We've had food banks not be able to fulfill them. Yeah,
thousands of people lining
right now.
Food. They have missed one check.
Yeah, and it's scary. So, I mean, I wonder, Katya, when you shop for fabric even, I imagine how long you've lived in your current location for 7 years, right? And I imagine the woman who works the fabric store cashier line has been there every time that you've ever gone in the last 7 years. Cause that's but she can't be massively wealthy, right?
Yeah. I mean, fabric stores are very similar to comic book stores in the sense that the only real chain there is for that nationally is something like Joanne. And for honestly, most of the things I buy, it's pretty relatively specialty. You can't get it at Joanne. So it's I think a lot of fabric stores are in the same position of they make enough to make ends meet, do okay, pay their people. But this isn't I don't know. I have a fabric store that I've been going to ever since I moved to North Carolina. And it's great. I love it. I like going in there. I like buying stuff there. I don't know if it's going to be here.
Right.
When all this is said and done.
So, I remember when everybody started closing everything. Wayne's former store said, okay, we're going to shut down because we have to, and we're going to do curbside delivery. That lasted a week.
Most fabric stores.
Yeah.
And see, the problem is also with fabrics and textiles. You have to be able to feel it and see it really.
Right.
Otherwise, it's ordering it online. So you can't. They never even did that. They were just nope.
Right. And that's exactly what I was thinking. There's no, so that lasted a week. The other store did the same thing for 1 week. Both stores are now doing mail order. And if you're mail ordering from either store, it's that loyalty thing that Dan was talking about. I definitely, if I want to get something, I want Todd and Jeff, who are the owners of Phantom and New Dimension, I want them to be in business next year. So if I needed something, I'd probably mail order from one of them, but I don't need anything right now because I wasn't preparing for this either. And also, I'm not rich. There's only so much any of us can do. And when everything closed down, it's we're going to be closed down for 2 weeks. We're going to be closed down for 4 weeks. It might be 6 months.
That loyalty thing, Amazon has been there where you could order these graphic novels cheaper and with free shipping for ages now. That's been part of the problem to begin with. And now if you want to mail order from the store, you got to pay for the shipping. So it's Amazon becomes.
You got to pay for the shipping. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Amazon, you're also just,
Amazon's already a better option in terms of price.
Right.
Now you can't just go to the store and buy the stuff.
There's no browsing. There's no, I mean, most of the books that I enjoy, most comic books that I enjoy, most records that I loved, and the way I ended up with a collection of like some 3,000 or however many ridiculous amount of DVDs that I have. Wayne, you've been to my house and seen the DVD room. Like I've got a room that's just a library of stuff, and that's because I used to just, I'm the kind of guy that would go to the movie store and just like page their stuff and say, this has an interesting cover. Read the back of it. This is fun. Like it's it's just picking it up gets kind of got me. And one of the things you don't get, I'm going to toot my own horn again here. One of the things you don't get shopping online for comics is you don't get me. Right.
You don't get
exactly.
You don't get that guy at the store who has read this stuff, who knows this material, not just knows this material, but I've known you for 20 years. I know what you like. I can guide you to stuff I guarantee you're going to like.
Yes. In fact, as an example, one of my favorite books for years, which we've talked about on the show, Wayne's the one who told me to start reading Batman again. And I remember going to stores. Yeah. Oh, are you reading Batman? Of course I'm not reading Batman. Why would I read Batman? I have no interest in whatsoever. No, just buy this issue. Buy this issue of Batman. It's been great. And and Tom King, because I hadn't read Batman in 20 years, and so I did. So that's the thing. Katya, at a fabric store, you just said, like, sure, you could go to joannes.com, I assume. I'm not even going to check. I'm going to assume that I could go to joannes.com and buy some purple cotton right now if I wanted to, right? Like, or I could get red silk, or I could get a fabric in a color just by clicking. Yeah. But that's not how you buy fabric. How you buy fabric is you go in and you wander through the aisles and you touch stuff and you say, this feels really nice and soft and fuzzy and perfect for my skin. I'm going to buy this and make something out of it. I don't know what, right?
Yeah, no, that's part of it. I mean, also part of it is like Joanne's. There's a slight difference in that between like fabric and like supplies like that and comic books, because like, I mean, kind of like what you talked about, like you can get the same comic book at any number of retailers, comic book stores, Amazon, whatever. The same is not always true of fabric. Like the fabrics that are carried by Joann's are very different from the fabrics that are carried by like Daily Mood fabrics, or Watch Party One Way, and which are also very different from the ones carried by my store. So like the things that are carried by the store locally, you can't buy it at Joann.
Right.
And you probably can't even find them online just because like they're difficult to source because not that many people sew. But yeah, like you are, I mean, one of the things that's like, I think that does resonate though, is like you are paying for the service of being able to go touch things and also for somebody else's opinion and expertise. Because like, there's been a number of times where I'll be like, oh, I'm making this pattern. I want like this thing, and this thing. And they'll be like, oh, we don't have that, but I'll order it for you. Or have you thought of this, doing this and this and this instead? And yeah, like that's valuable. You can't get that from a fabric store or from an online fabric store, rather.
And also, like you said, you've been shopping there 7 years. She just knows you. She's seen the clothes that you've made. So even if you're not thinking, even if you're not looking for something, she might very well say, oh, I'm glad you came in. There's something that's perfect for you that I want you to see because you might want some. And I imagine that happens. And
it's also just nice to go in and like talk with a bunch of people who are into the same kinds of things that you are. Like most people in my daily life don't want to talk about fabric for 2 hours. However, at the fabric store, there's a ton of people who absolutely do.
Yes.
Oddly enough, there are a lot of people in my life who want to talk about Batman for 2 hours.
Well, but the store was a place where that was appropriate, right?
Yeah.
Like
and I'm pulling numbers out of my butt here, but like I sold 50 copies of Wicked and Divine because I wouldn't shut up about it. Like people come in and would ask me for recommendations, and there were books that I was just into. And Matt, I don't recommend every book I read to everybody who walks through the door.
Oh God, no. Some of them are bad.
Yeah, because this is not going to be the thing you're into at all. And I get that, but that's part of that skill set of working in a store like that, is being able to direct your customers to the things they're going to like. I have sold books to people that have made them ecstatically happy, and I just think it's shit.
Oh, sure.
People describe what they're into, and I'm thinking, oh dear God, but here I got something for you, and they're thrilled. Yeah.
And that's well, I mean that's the thing, right? That's the experience of the live store. So we talked about all the reasons that it's dying. Now it's, fabric stores, music stores, all of them are suddenly in a place where without income for the foreseeable future, because that's what I'm really afraid of. I don't think it's going to be 2 more weeks. So, if you watch the moron who happens to be our current president, everything's going to be open by May 1st. No, you're not. And so if you're not open by May 1st.
Yeah, especially like non-essential stuff is probably not opening up until like June, maybe July. Like,
right.
And if the comic shop opens, there's no new material.
Right.
Nothing's being produced. I mean, you can still go and buy
what movies are you going? Yeah. What movies are you going to be watching when the movie theaters finally open back up? And this is why I joked like Katya might just win our game. And that's
an actually real thing. That's not just a joke.
Right. It's because like summer blockbuster season, everything is delayed. Black Widow, which should have been one of the biggest movies of the year, is delayed.
Free comic book day, which I guarantee you is the biggest retail day of the year for every comic store in America.
Yeah,
I missed that this year.
Right. Yep. And I mean, Wayne, you said like for the places, because your store is not the only store that's next to a college. Lots of stores, comic book stores put themselves, not just, in Pittsburgh, you're the one next to the college in Pittsburgh, but every college town in America, somewhere within walking distance of your biggest college is, there's a comic book store. Yeah. Because who has seen their entire customer base turnover every 4 years, because that's the entire plan. Yeah. I'm taking the spot so that I can sell to the geeks at this college. And all of them look to bulk up on sales money at the last week, the first week of May, because
students are leaving.
Yeah. And it floats you for the entire summer. And all of them don't have that now, assuming they can even come back assuming they can come back eventually, they're going to come back to a down market. Movie theaters are going to come back to a down market where not only are there no movies being worked on right now in Hollywood because Hollywood shut down. Assuming Black Widow is finished, Mulan is finished. These were movies that were supposed to come out. That Mulan was supposed to be one of the biggest movies of the year. It was gonna put me in the lead in the box office game. It's gonna come out. Who the fuck wants to go into a movie theater? Everybody's terrified. Even if the movie theaters are open, what do you do? We were talking before we went on the air. I'm just thinking about things like Comic-Con is maybe not going to happen. San Diego Comic-Con, which is the biggest comic book convention in the world. Not just because, partly people are afraid to gather in places, but also, how do you even run a panel? No stores. No movies are in production. Marvel has nothing to come. Marvel Comics, Marvel Studios doesn't have anything to go to San Diego Comic-Con and talk about right now, which is weird. What store, every store in America that might have normally gone there. Neither of the stores in Pittsburgh go there. It's a long way, but every store in America that would normally go there, they have all their employees are currently laid off. How do you even plan an event like that?
How do you justify
Coachella
paying for table space and travel and hotel rooms and all that?
Yeah, Burning Man got canceled last week. There's just the entire industry of
It's called Comic-Con International. So does that? I can't imagine a lot of international traffic is going to be just happening right away.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we were talking before we started recording the music industry, touring bands, current bands who are touring. That's how bands make their money now. And I joked before we started recording that Elton John will be fine. But if I use the example, there's a band I've been in the last 3 or 4 years called the Struts, who have been relatively successful, but they've also been on the road for like 4 years straight. And they're releasing a little video every week, just what they're doing from their apartment in Los Angeles. And they're an up and coming band. They're doing well. They're not multi-millionaires. I've seen their apartments now. They're nice, modest little apartments in Los Angeles. They make their money by being on the road, and they've canceled everything for the next 6 months. They have no idea when they're going to be back. And what does that do? Just not only to just their income in the moment, but their career in the long term. And I'm using them as an example. A band I just discovered, called Bones UK. There's a plug. I'm plugging my new favorite band. They were going to be on Seth Meyers. They showed up at the studio, rehearsed that afternoon, and that was the day that they went, oh, we're not doing an audience, go home.
Mm-hmm.
So this was their network debut. They rehearsed, and that episode didn't
And we're
air.
sent home.
And we're sent home.
Yeah. So look at stuff like that. If you think about, the ripple effects to go non-comics, right? Every talk show that you might watch on television is off production right now. Saturday Night Live did an episode last week of like all the stars sort of doing comedy over Zoom. Essentially, that's how the Colbert show is being taped right now.
Jimmy
How
Fallon's
Seth Meyers is being taped.
Yeah.
Jimmy Fallon's taped like that. And you know what that means? They're essentially doing fucking podcasts.
Yes.
Like, that's what they're doing. They're doing what we do, only like arguably
They're more famous.
No, they're more famous. And again, talk about toot our own horns. I've the shows that I watch regularly, I actually like John Oliver a lot, and I think he's actually been doing a fairly good job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Because he's still doing the same thing he always does.
Yeah. Well, he's just with no audience. He's doing it from his home. While I'm not saying I'm funnier, my wife is a very big fan of the Colbert show, Late Show with Stephen Colbert. I think I'm better at this than he is. He's never tried it before. And I don't think, at just sort of recording a show from my house, I've been doing it for 2 years. Mm-hmm. He's been doing it for a week and a half.
Yeah. Well,
and it shows.
I think one of the reasons John Oliver has been successful is he's still working with a team of writers. I mean, other than there not being an audience there, it's pretty much exactly the same show. Whereas the Jimmy Fallon stuff, it's just like, here are me and my kids in the kitchen. And I'm trying to do a monologue. And I'm like, and there have been cute moments with his guest, but
I'm not saying I'm funnier than they are. I'm not. Right. They've got a talent, but to suddenly move your entire livelihood to this work from home thing, and it becomes weird because I know, a little inside baseball, but internationally, podcast listenership is down for everybody who is not someone who used to star on a television show. Yeah. And it's a weird thing because suddenly
more time to listen.
Well, you'd think there'd be more time to listen, except that nobody's in a car or on a subway commuting to work. Right. and also every podunk little pseudo-academic pop culture analysis show like this one is now competing with the fucking Tonight Show. And I'm like, I don't want that. So it's a weird thing. But when you wonder, like,
if we get Sting for a guest,
right. Sorry, Dan, you've been bumped. Yeah. But you've been bumped for Sting. Yeah, but I mean, what happens?
I'll allow it.
Oh, come on, Dan. Give us some Roxanne right now. We might change our mind.
Yeah, what do you got?
But I just do tantric
so what do you
yoga.
do there? What do you do there though? Right? Because I wonder, you're sooner or later you're gonna have the shows go back and tape it from an audience again. Probably, because here's what I'm thinking of. Years and years ago, the Hollywood writer strike happened, and they cut all the shows. All the talk shows went away. Letterman came back first because David Letterman made a deal with the Writers Guild himself, not the network, literally Worldwide Pants, which David Letterman was his production studio that he controlled. He's like, no, their demands are reasonable. So he made a deal with the WGA. And so the Letterman show came back. NBC then ordered everybody to come back. They ordered the Tonight Show to come back, and they ordered what was then the Conan O'Brien show, to come back, and they ordered Last Call with Carson Daly to come back. And so Jay Leno and Conan O'Brien both came back. They refused to make their writers come back, but they're like, well, I can't let you fire the cameraman and the editor and everything. So they came back and they worked their shows without writers. So it was just like, okay, we're going to come back on the air, and, I'm a comedian. I'll figure something out. So Jay was just writing his own material. Conan was writing his own material. And then they made Carson Daly come back, and Carson's like, I'm not funny. That's not his gig. Because he explained it on the air. I remember I watched it that night. And if you can ever find the clip on YouTube, he's like, I didn't want to come back. I am against crossing strike lines, but they told me if I didn't come back, they would fire my camera crew and they would fire everybody because like the show. So it's either come back or there's no show. And he was like, he had just moved the show. I can't remember if he moved from New York to LA or LA to New York, whichever he did. He was just like, I can't do that to these people that I made move across the country. So we're going to do the best show that we can without comedy writers. And he's like, I'm not funny. He explained it on the air. It was crazy. And then what they ended up doing was they ended up scaling back the show, and it stopped being in front of a live studio audience. It stopped being the Carson Daly Show, Last Call, became, rather than doing stand up in like in front of, like a traditional talk show, he started just interviewing musicians and stuff sitting in booths at bars. And then when the writer's strike ended, the show just stayed that, because he's like, why, it sort of became, why am I working in front of this audience? Why am I doing this thing just because everybody else does it? Like, they were trying to make it look like a comedian talk show. And he's like, I'm not a comedian. I'll do something different. And it became the show that was, it became the show that was taped in a bar and was for years. And I wonder if that's going to happen with other stuff. Will there be a point when Seth Meyers and Jimmy Fallon and Stephen Colbert, John Oliver, why would they go back to work if you can do that? I mean, do you need to have everybody taped in front of a live studio audience with live bands and everything? Or can you just do the show, in front of a green screen?
I think the pop culture history of this era, when it's written 10 years from now, will be interesting. It's the analysis of the way all of it playing out.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And if you can do that, as much as I hate it, to go back to our original topic, I miss being able to go to Blockbuster. I miss being able to go to Hollywood Video and Suncoast Video. And I'm the guy who hung out at those places because I love movies so much, and I was able to talk about a movie.
I miss record/CD stores.
Right. Jerry's Records, Jerry's Records, which means nothing to anybody who's not from Pittsburgh. But if you're from Pittsburgh, you just went, oh, fuck, Jerry's Records, because they were the store that everybody, that you go to. But it's not like I stopped watching movies. It's not like I stopped listening to music. Wayne, you were just talking about, I just discovered this band. You just said that, right? So, so that still exists. So does it become a thing where we discover comics in different ways?
And I think that's very possible. And that's it. Like I recognize my own culpability in the death of the CD store, record store. It became easier to stream this stuff, to download MP3s. I don't buy. There are some artists I still buy a physical copy of the CD to support the artist. But I listen to a tremendous amount of music through Spotify, and bands make a kick out of that. I'm fully aware of, as much as I say I miss that experience, that community experience, going and having these conversations with other fans and other customers and all that stuff. I'm absolutely culpable in the death of that industry. And I don't want it to happen to comics, but I fully understand how it can and quite possibly will.
So we've resolved nothing.
Yeah. So we've resolved nothing.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Hate to sound the death knell of brick and mortar comic shops, but
I don't want it to be. I don't either. Have a fix.
I really kind of wanted to retire from there,
there's no. I'm writing a fucking dissertation on comics. Obviously, I love them, right?
Right.
I'm putting myself through hell here, but I don't know. Nothing can last forever. It's weird if it does get killed this way. And I don't think it will. Despite what I just said, there are still record stores.
Yeah.
There's I know it's hard for me to buy a CD, but if I want to buy vinyl, I know exactly where to go. Right.
Yeah.
So are comic book stores going to maybe be that? Maybe.
I think there could be a resurgence in it.
But it is so weird to suddenly find out the thing that you love, which is not sudden for us, but the thing that you love is a niche market. And in a worldwide pandemic where people are literally dying, maybe supporting your niche market is not the most important thing. And I get that. And I get why that has to be. Yeah. But then there are real people who work at these places and who are employed by this industry. And I don't know what happens next. And I don't know that we can know what happens next.
Yeah.
And I know it's not going to be the same.
I think that was all true before the pandemic. This just really, pushes pushes the timetable.
Yeah. So we resolved nothing.
So we've resolved nothing.
Well,
and
on that uplifting note,
just as a footnote, I know people will be listening to this next week, 2 weeks from now, whenever this one goes up. But as we're sitting here, this is the week that Pop Culture PCAC would have been taking place.
Yes, we would be there.
So this is what you got tonight instead of us just reading the papers that none of us actually wrote because we didn't go.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, and it's very odd to do a show like this. I was talking to people today about it was like, has anybody done an episode of their show devoted to the coronavirus yet? And I was like, yeah, I mean, in some way, every episode
Everybody.
is because I mean, even for us, it's specifically,
well, everything's changed by it.
Yeah, like nothing's the same.
On some level, whether it's minor or major. I mean, Mav and I both teach, so it's like the education system looks radically different than it did months ago. Like retail looks radically different, healthcare looks radically, like literally everything. The way you talk to your mom probably looks different.
Yeah. So
it seems like everything you say to someone is always prefaced with some.
So are you okay?
or like, well, with everything going on now.
Yeah.
X, Y, Z, it's like, or there's always some caveat like, well, I would be doing this, and this, but with everything going on right now, and it's just like this understood, like everyone just knows, like, yep, I hear you. We're all in the same boat.
Weird, aren't they?
Yeah. So if people want to know what you would be doing, Dan, where would they find you? Well, that's my killer segue there.
That's amazing. I'm going to steal that. So our the podcast that I do with my friends Scott, Jared, Sean, Kate, and Link is the Comic Book Pitt podcast, and that's Pitt with 2 T's to show some love for our hometown of Pittsburgh. And you can find us at comicbookpitt.com. And then I also do another podcast, not as often, but we're trying to resolve that, called the Pilot Season Podcast. And I do that with my wife, Jen. And that is a show where we only watch and review the pilot episode of a TV show. And it's the only kind of rule is it's something that neither of us have ever seen before. So we're coming into it fresh. And we've seen a lot of garbage, but we've seen a lot of good stuff, too. So we'll leave it to the listener to decide which is which. But that's about it. And of course, with both podcasts, we're on all the major social media platforms.
You'll be linked in the show notes.
Cool.
Katya.
Well, per usual, you can find me online on Instagram at justthatnerdkid for all of your cat and sewing related content.
Wayne.
I got nothing new, but I do want, let's put in the show notes, if you want to support your local comic shops, and very specifically my local comic shops, Phantom of the Attic in Oakland and New Dimension Comics. They are still doing mail orders. Send them an email. We'll link those in the show notes. Try to help them stay alive, whether I'm there or not. They are both places I support, and I want them to survive.
And it's a worry. It is a real worry. I mean, we made light of things in some places, but I don't know how either of those stores survives. A month, maybe, but 6 months, a year. What's left? I don't know. And
in a larger picture, I mean, I'm recommending them because they're my stores. But wherever you live, if you're listening to this in Peoria, send an order to your local comic shop.
If you need a graphic novel and it's not dire to get it from Amazon, if you can help people out, it does help.
And I think the same, if I could just throw it out there, I think the same also goes for your favorite comic book creators, writers, artists. Even if they don't have current work or something, everyone's available now on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I'm sure if you reach out to someone and say, hey, can I give you some money and you give me something? I'm sure no one will turn you down.
Yeah.
So
there's a million Patreons out there. Those people are looking for work right now. They need to pay the bills as well.
Yep.
So am I. I'm looking for work. We need to get our Patreon up one of these days, which we don't have yet. But if you want to just say hi to me, you can definitely follow me on Twitter at Chris Maverick or on my blog at www.chrismaverick.com. You can follow the show on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, all of the places, always at Vox Popcast. You can follow the show's blog at www.voxpopcast.com, where we post not only the current show and the show notes for it, but we also talk about whatever we're going to be talking about on the next show. We give you a little preview. We give you some of our thoughts. We ask you for feedback that we end up talking about on the episode, which is what we did today. Sometimes we ask you to be on the show if you have something interesting to say. That's how we find our guests a lot of times. So subscribe to us there. And if you enjoy the show, and I certainly hope you do, please subscribe to us on iTunes or Stitcher or Spotify or wherever the hell else you get podcasts from. And do us a favor, leave us a 5-star review, especially on iTunes, Apple Podcasts. If you leave us a 5-star review and write a review, and it helps us be more popular somehow magically in like the gods of technology algorithms. And we need that because, yeah, it is a real, I mean, I said the thing about podcasts, but it is a weird world where popularity matters all of a sudden, and now more than ever. And also, it's just nice to hear from people. So definitely let us know. Definitely write us on Twitter or our blog or whatever. I would like to thank Dan once again for joining us. I'd like to thank Maximilian of Thoughtform Music for our epic theme song, building ever so more epically and playing us out. I'd like to thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thanks. See you guys.
Bye.
Worst ending ever.